Hello everyone, welcome to our channel The Planner's Way. Myself Rohit. Today's video is going to be based on resource planning, in which we try to demonstrate what resource planning is, how we do it, and the benefits of resource planning. And at the end, we try to explain the resource planning, taking an example, how we plan up the resource for a simple project. To begin with, the basic definition, resource planning is the process of identifying and allocating and managing the resource needed to complete a project, which includes manpower, equipment, materials that are required to complete the project within time and budget. It ensures the optimal utilization and makes sure there is no overallocation or the underuse of the resources throughout the project from its commencement to that of closure. How do we perform the resource planning? Uh, I have made a couple of series of steps to go through how we begin with the resource planning in a project. The first one is to identifying the resources for each of the task. As we have made a baseline schedule, we know how or what's the scope of the project, what's the timeline of it. The next step that begins after the baselining or after the preparation of the schedule is to allocate the resources for them, where try to figure out the required resources for each task. For that, we use the estimating techniques, how much the quantity is, and we try to figure out from there what the number of resources, what skill set we need, and the time for which we need what resource. And the third one we need to take care of is the availability and the constraint. That means how much days the resource is working. If the schedule is following the 5 days working calendar, what's the working calendar for that resource and how it impacts the schedule. We need to do that analysis as well while doing the resource planning, with something we call the bucket planning. The next step is to allocate the resource analysis, looking up to that of the RESI, the chart that we use, some histograms. Most of the time we use the project management softwares like Primavera or MS Project, Asta Power Project, which is most common in the UK for building projects. And at last, once we allocate all the resources to the task, the next step is to monitor the usage and adjust throughout the project. That means if there is any resource shortage or there is any peak demand, then we need to figure out which are our critical activities and where we need to assign those resources first, and later we can reassign, make the adjustment of the resources throughout the project or throughout the phases that begins with. The benefits of doing the resource planning at the first place are it prevents the over allocation and the burnout. That means we can easily figure out what's the peak resource demand for each resources, like how much civil engineers we need, how much skilled worker we need, or how much unskilled worker we need, how much of the project manager we need, what's the number of them. We know at the first place the peak resource demand, and it helps us to prevent the overallocation and the burnout of the resources. It ensures the task have the right resources at the right time. It improves the cost control and forecasting of the resources for the future phases. It supports the efficient scheduling and critical path management. That means if any non-critical items are taking the resources for which we are on the shortage or we need to accelerate the critical items, then we can shift the resources from the non-critical items to that of the critical one, through which we can manage the critical path. Through resource planning, it enables the better risk management and the decision making for the key stakeholder. As we know what's the peak resource demand, what's our critical activities, then it enables better risk management and decision making for our higher stakeholders. Let's take an example of the IT software development project, how we need to plan for the resources for that. In the first place, we need to figure out how much is the what's the duration of the project is, and the next step is to plan for what are the resources needed on that project. Like as we need the developers, user interface designers, testers, cloud interface, many more. For those, we need to plan up the resources, how much days we need the developers, and for how much developer we need, how much the UX designer we need, how much the tester we need, and the key point is where we need and how much the number is. Resource planning helps us to find out how much number of resources we need at what time. which makes the project manager's life easier to manage the resources and maintain the resource forecast. At the end of the video, let's see what's the areas we have covered. We have covered regarding what is the resource planning, how we do it, and what's the benefits doing the resource planning at the first place. We try to figure out it with a sample example of the software building. The next video in this series will be on the S curve. For more insights, please subscribe the Planner's Way. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next video.